Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through all that noise, look at your sources, and pull out the key insights you can actually use. And today, well, we're tackling a big one. Finding, and maybe more importantly, living your higher purpose. The materials you've brought for this dive seem really focused, not just on finding a job title, but on recognizing something deeper that's apparently already inside us.
That's exactly it. That's the mission here. One source puts it beautifully, something like, life is only the journey of seeking your higher purpose. So it's not really about goal setting in the usual sense. It's more about tuning into a direction that's, well, already set.
Okay, tuning in. And the main guide for that, according to these sources, is this idea of the golden thread. What exactly is that? How do they say we can feel this unmistakable tug they mention?
Right, the golden thread. Think of it as an invisible connection. It's that gut feeling, that intuition that pulls you towards, say, the right people you need to meet,
Oh,
or the books you just happen to pick up, the places you feel drawn to. You don't make it up.
yeah.
You follow it.
I like that. Like the guidance system's already running, you just need to listen. Okay, so for this deep dive, let's maybe start with the mindset shift needed to even hear that internal call. Then we can unpack what purpose actually is. Apparently it's multi-layered. And finally, look at the practical stuff, like the path and the compass that keep you connected to that golden thread. Sound good?
Sounds like a plan.
All right, first things first. The core idea in all these sources seems pretty radical. You're not an accident. Everyone has a purpose. One source says creation doesn't make administrative errors. I like that. But to even begin listening for that golden thread, we apparently have to get past the narrow self, the ego.
Yeah, that's the first big hurdle, isn't it? We often filter purpose through that small, maybe insecure part of ourselves. What we think we should be doing to get approval or fit in.
Right.
These sources are pushing us beyond that. They mention this simple phrase from the author's son, Christopher. He just wanted to become a bigger me.
A bigger me. Simple, but profound. It connects to that idea of the soul's immensity, doesn't it? This
Yeah.
potential that's bigger than our day-to-day reality.
Exactly. We're getting into some deep philosophical water here. Wordsworth, the poet, he wrote something like, "Your exterior semblance doth belie thy soul's immensity," meaning our body is just, the outward appearance. Our real self is apparelled in celestial light. It's huge.
Wow.
And this ties right into Carl Jung's work on individuation, that whole process of becoming fully yourself, realizing your potential, fulfilling your unique destiny.
Okay, so immense hidden potential.
Yeah.
But bigger me still feels a bit abstract. Is there a stronger image the sources use for this creative power waiting inside?
Yes, definitely. They bring in the philosopher Jean Houston and this really powerful metaphor, the Godseed.
The Godseed.
Yeah. The idea is you're not just, as she puts it, an encapsulated bag of skin dragging around a dreary little ego. No, you are fundamentally an evolutionary wonder, a trillion cells singing together. The Godseed is like, well, a divine potential within you waiting to sprout.
Okay, I get that. But if it's a seed, it needs to break out of its shell, right?
Yeah.
Which sounds maybe a bit destructive. For the ego, anyway.
Exactly. It is a kind of death, but a necessary one. The ego needs to be like the embryo that breaks through its seed coat. That's
Right.
why they bring up that old biblical parable, unless a grain of wheat falls down and dies, it's just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit.
Oh, okay.
So that dying isn't literal death, obviously. It's about letting go of that small, limited self-image. That's how you make space to become something much, much bigger, more fruitful. So if we make that shift, if we accept we're more than just a narrow self, then we also need to rethink this idea of my purpose as something totally separate and personal. Because
Okay.
according to these sources, purpose isn't really an isolated thing. It's always in some way a shared purpose. We're all interconnected.
Why is that distinction so crucial? I mean, doesn't focusing on my purpose give you drive?
It can, yeah. But focusing only on that can lead you down a pretty narrow path, maybe even burnout. Think about the human body, right? The liver has its specific job, its individual purpose, like dealing with toxins.
Okay.
But doing that job serves the whole body. It doesn't work in isolation. That synergy, where the individual part serves the whole, that's the key idea.
Okay, the body analogy helps, but the sources really lean into the bee kingdom example
Yep.
to explain this, right? Why bees? How does that clarify these different levels?
Well, the bee kingdom example is great because it shows how these levels stack up. So each bee, it has its own specific personal purpose. Maybe it's foraging, maybe it's tending to the young. That's level 1.
Got it.
Then there's the shared purpose, serving the colony, making honey, keeping the hive going. That's level 2. But then, and this is the part we often miss, there's this huge universal purpose. By doing their job, bees pollinate something like 90% of the world's plants and crops. They serve Mother Nature on a massive scale.
Wow. Yeah. They're basically a blessing just by being bees.
Exactly. And that leads us right to the 3 levels for humans. First, the individual level. This is where you grow, you learn skills, you become the best version of yourself you can be.
Okay. Self-improvement. Makes sense.
Then comes the shared level. This is where that improved self starts looking outward. You use your skills to serve others, your community. You overcome that feeling of being separate.
So contributing to the group.
Right. And finally, the universal level. This is where your life aligns with something much bigger. A cosmic plan, maybe?
Yeah.
What the Source calls cosmic-sized love. At this level, just your presence, once you're free from that narrow ego, becomes a blessing to the world. You're not just achieving, you're actively contributing to the whole.
Moving from just me to we, and then something even bigger.
Precisely. Okay, so if we're aiming for this universal kind of purpose, how do we stay on track? What's the compass? The sources are pretty clear on this. The driving force, the reliable guide, is joy.
Joy, not happiness or satisfaction.
Right, specifically joy. They point out that early psychology kind of dismissed happiness, saying it had no evolutionary value. But these sources, they put joy right at the center.
Okay, but how do they define joy? Because you're right, it feels different from just pleasure or feeling satisfied.
Yeah, they define it as unreasonable happiness, meaning it doesn't need a specific cause or stimulus like pleasure does, or a reason like satisfaction. It just arises from your core being.
Unreasonable happiness. I like that. So if it's unreasonable, how do you, practically use it as a compass? How do you know it's joy and not just, a fleeting good mood?
Well, the key quality they highlight is that joy is expansive. It feels like opening up, growing. It never asks you to hide or shrink or play small. When you feel that sense of rightness, that expansion, that's your signal. That's the compass needle pointing north.
So follow the expansion, like Joseph Campbell's Follow Your Bliss.
Exactly like that. Following your joy guides you towards your true nature, your highest good.
Yep.
It connects back to that ancient Greek idea of eudaimonia, the good spirit, or guiding angel nudging you towards not just your own fulfillment, but the greater good too.
Okay, so joy is the compass. And following that compass eventually leads you to the call.
Yeah, the vocation.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The vocation. Carl Jung, again, he pointed out the Latin root. Vocare means to call, invite, or summon. So to have a vocation literally means to be addressed by a voice.
Like the call to adventure in stories. And that call, it can be exciting, right? A great joy. But often the sources suggest it comes as something painful, like a wound or a crisis, an inciting incident.
Yeah, it can be either pleasant or painful. The author actually shared a really personal example of this, a mysterious experience he had when he was 17.
Oh, yeah. What happened?
He was at this place, Richmond Circus Roundabout, and he just heard this clear voice say, "You're going to live here one day." Oh! And then, boom, he got this intuitive flash, like a movie trailer, of his future life. For him, that was the call. Undeniable. Wow, that's specific. Did the sources say if it's always that dramatic?
Yeah.
Like a voice?
Okay.
Or can it be quieter, more of a slow realization?
I think the intensity can definitely vary, but the core thing seems to be that the call is unmistakable. It cuts through the usual mental chatter of the ego, whether it's a sudden voice like that or just a persistent, quiet pull towards something specific. The function is the same. It kicks off the journey.
Okay, so the call kicks off the journey, which leads us straight into that classic framework, the hero journey. Joseph Campbell, right? He defined a hero basically as someone who gives their life to something bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
And that whole journey, departure, initiation, return, seems to require that painful thing we talked about earlier, the death of the narrow self so something new can be born.
That transformation seems, mandatory for the journey. And if it requires that death, is that what Jung was seeing in his patients, that resistance to letting go of the small self?
It really seems like it. Jung talked about the general neurosis of our age, didn't he? This feeling of meaninglessness, aimlessness. He apparently said about a third of his patients weren't suffering from textbook neuroses, but from the sheer lack of meaning in their lives.
Wow, a third. That's huge. And to tackle that lack of meaning, the sources bring in logotherapy. Viktor Frankl.
Right, Frankl, the Holocaust survivor.
Yeah.
His big idea was that the primary drive in humans isn't pleasure, like Freud said, or power, like Adler said, but the will to meaning.
Exactly. Finding meaning is what keeps us going. And Frankl laid out 3 general levels where we can find it. Level 1 is creative meaning, finding meaning through our work, our actions, what we contribute.
Okay, doing stuff. Makes sense.
Level 2 is experiential meaning, finding it through experiences like love, beauty, connection with nature, or with other people.
Feeling stuff also makes sense.
Right, doing and feeling. But then there's level 3, which is maybe the trickiest, but also the deepest. Super meaning.
Super meaning? What's that?
It's this idea that there's an ultimate universal meaning to existence, but it's bigger than our human minds can fully grasp. It exceeds and surpasses the finite intellectual capacities of man, as Frankl put it.
So we can't fully understand the ultimate point of it all, but we can trust that there is one.
That seems to be the idea. It requires a kind of faith, maybe. A trust in that cosmic-sized love we mentioned earlier. Actually, Frankl's nephew, Freddie Frankl, summed up the practical side of living this really well. He said you have to learn how to suffer well, to love well, and to work well.
Suffer well, love well, work well. What does suffer well mean in this context?
It means finding meaning in your suffering, not avoiding pain, but seeing how it can be a catalyst, how you can use it purposefully for growth rather than letting it just crush you.
Okay, finding meaning even in suffering, that's powerful. But let's bring this back down to earth. We often start by asking, how do I find my purpose? But the sources say that question itself is kind of flawed, right? Because it assumes your purpose is separate from you, something you have to go out and find.
Exactly. It implies separation. How can your purpose not be right here with you already? So instead of this big abstract search, the material suggests a really simple but pretty potent self-inquiry practice.
Oh, yeah. What is it?
Just completing the sentence. I feel on purpose in my life and doing it multiple times, over and over.
That's it. I feel on purpose when.
That's it. Sounds simple, but it forces you to notice the threads that are already woven into your life. You might write down, I feel on purpose when I'm helping my coworker figure something out, or when I lose track of time working on my hobby, or maybe just when I'm quietly walking in the woods.
Ah, so you're identifying moments where the golden thread is already showing up.
Precisely. Those are the feelings, the activities, the states of being to follow. The clues are already there.
Okay. And if we boil everything down, the Godseed, the hero's journey, the 3 levels, finding meaning, what's the absolute core? The simplest answer to, what is my purpose?
Well, after all that complexity, the final distillation offered by the sources is actually incredibly simple and maybe profound because of it. Ultimately, your purpose is to love the world. Your real work is just to be a presence of love.
To love the world.
Yeah, like the poet Mary Oliver asked, there is only one question, how to love this world. That's the fundamental task.
Okay, but loving the world. That sounds great, but it feels hard when you're carrying around past hurts, regrets, grudges. This seems like where forgiveness comes in.
Absolutely essential. Forgiveness isn't really about letting someone else off the hook. It's about changing your relationship with the past so you can be free to live and love now. It frees the narrow self from its baggage. One source, A Course in Miracles, puts it starkly. Forgiveness is my function as the light of the world.
Why? How does forgiveness make you the light?
Because it's the tool that helps you remember who you really are, that bigger me, that essence beyond the story of hurts and judgments. It clears the fog so that inner light can shine.
Okay, so wrapping this up, for you listening, the key tools seem to be look for that golden thread, that intuitive pull. Let unreasonable joy be your compass. And remember, purpose isn't just about you. It's personal, shared, and universal.
Right. And maybe one final thought to leave you with, building on all this. The sources talked about the pandemic, COVID-19, as a kind of death of normal, right? A huge collective inciting incident that jolted everyone out of their ordinary lives.
Yeah, a global call to adventure almost.
And if the hero journey requires the death of the narrow self or the old way of being to birth something new,
then maybe the whole world is kind of going through that process now.
Yeah.
Challenging us to find our collective bigger me. One source even asked, we long to return to normal, but normal led to this.
Exactly. So if the old normal wasn't really working, the question becomes, what better normal do you want to help create? Thinking about those 3 levels, personal, shared, universal, what small step, aligned with that purpose, can you maybe take today?